What is going on? This is Dan from dango.blog, and today I want to talk to you about circadian rhythms and fasting. Now, in this video, you're going to learn exactly what a circadian rhythm is. I'll also do a brief overview of what intermittent fasting is as well, and I also want to train you, or actually show you how you can train or entrain your circadian rhythms to go with your fasting schedule, and exactly how these things optimize your body for health, and not only health but for fat loss. You can use this stuff to really optimize your hunger signals, to the way that your hormones work, and yeah, we're going to be talking about all of that in this video. Now, you may not be up to speed on what intermittent fasting is. You probably are if you're watching this video, but if not, I'm just going to go through a brief kind of description. Intermittent fasting is just a period of time where you abstain from food. Now, there are certain benefits that come along with intermittent fasting, some that have been proven and some that haven't been proven. And some of these are just better digestion, increased fat loss, increased cognitive ability. And if you actually see a lot of people who do fasting, you're going to notice that when they're in their fast periods, their brains actually work at a high optimal level. And this is the reason is because you have catecholamines and all these neurotransmitters that secrete into your brain as a result of not having food in your stomach. In general, humans were not meant to eat every single day. We're not even meant to eat every single hour like a lot of people are doing. And yes, you know, there are very big and great benefits that come with intermittent fasting. Now, you may be wondering, how does your circadian rhythm relate to intermittent fasting, and what the heck is a circadian rhythm in the first place? Well, a circadian rhythm, okay, is a biological cycle that runs for 24 hours every day. Okay, so circadian rhythms influence sleep-wake cycles, hormone release, your eating habits, digestion, your hunger, body temperature, and a lot of other bodily functions. And if you want to understand exactly like what a circadian rhythm is, all you have to do is just like, okay, so I'll tell you one of mine, and I hope I'm not going to get too too out there for you, but when I wake up, I have to go number 2 every single morning. And that is a part of my natural bodily process. And I'm going to guess that's a part of your natural bodily process as well, if you're on point with your circadian rhythms. And that's just one way of how a circadian rhythm works. Another way in how a circadian rhythm works is just when you tend to go to sleep and when you tend to wake up. The thing is that we get to entrain our circadian rhythms, and it's on us to optimize our rhythms to actually work for us instead of against us. If they work for us, then our bodies start to respond in a lot of positive ways, which I'll get into a little bit later. But if you are not entraining your circadian rhythms very consciously, then it can actually lead to a lot of bad doo-doo as well. Now, let me get into a little bit more of what circadian rhythms are. So they respond primarily to light, darkness, eating habits, and physical activity. So when you think about your circadian rhythms, it's not necessarily when you sleep and not necessarily when you wake up. It actually involves a lot of other things that you do on a regular basis. And one of them I mentioned was, you know, going number 2 every single morning, at least in my case. Okay, so this 24-hour process is driven by your internal clock, and it's actually been widely researched in plants, animals, fungi, and yes, human beings as well. So simply put, you know, you, me, your dog, your cat, your mom, and every other living thing on this planet has an inner clock that coordinates our daily rhythms. Now, the importance of our circadian rhythms is, I hope I'm not understating it, because this inner cycle was so important to our overall health that the Nobel Prize actually awarded Jeffrey Hall, Michael Robash, and Michael Young for their discoveries on the circadian rhythm, and actually how plants, animals, and humans adapt to their biological rhythm so that they're synchronized with the Earth's revolutions. So if that doesn't really show you how important it is, then I can't really do anything for you right now. Okay, so why should we follow our circadian rhythms? So our bodies really haven't evolved much since the prehistoric days. If you really go down and dig deep, then you're going to understand that humans have not really changed their physiology their physiological equipment for the past 20,000 years. And this is the reason why intermittent fasting is still one of the greatest methods to optimize your health, because humans went through great periods of fasting and feasting, and we did not have food available to us all of the time. So, pretty much the problem is that, following your circadian rhythm in today's age is very difficult. Let's just say that. Okay, so every day, we're going to bed a little bit later than we should because we're watching Netflix, we're on our phones. The blue light, which I'll get into a little bit later, messes with our suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is the trigger. Again, I mean, I may be throwing big words at you, but I'm going to explain all of this in about 2 seconds. So when we overeat food and drink, when we get fat, when we avoid physical activity, pretty much, and if we're looking at screens 80% of our waking days, unfortunately, all of this and much more leads to lower energy, circadian rhythm disorders, constant weight gains, and actually eventually, what research is finding, eventual disease. So here's the science behind our circadian rhythms. So our rhythms are actually controlled by a group of nerves in the hypothalamus of the brain known as the suprachiasmatic nucleus. Okay, so it may sound like a mouthful, but let's just call it the SCN for short. Okay, and this is essentially our master clock. It's like a signaling center that responds to environmental cues like light, dark, physical activity, and your eating habits. Now, when certain cues are experienced, your body actually triggers hormones and regulates temperature to influence your metabolism, sleep, and mood. And an example, again, I showed you one where I go to one of my natural processes is to go number 2 every time I wake up. Another natural process, let's just talk about a simple one, is when we go to sleep and when we wake. When it gets to about, I'd say 8 to 8:30 p.m. and I'm actually saying this right now, it's 8 to 8:30. Usually it's about 9 p.m. I just came back from a 3-week honeymoon where we went to Sri Lanka, we went to Maldives, and then now I'm here back in Toronto, and that's a 12-hour time difference. So I'm just kind of getting back into my natural rhythms right now. So as like 8 o'clock hits, my body starts to turn down and I start to get a little bit sleepy, a little bit tired. Now, this could be different for you depending on what you do and depending on your lifestyle habits and whatnot. But for me, I start to get tired at a specific time. I've actually entrained my rhythm to wake up at the same time every single day now. And this is kind of a pain as well because I usually wake up at 6. And what happens is that on the weekends, if I go out and I party a little bit, I still wake up at 6, which is a pain in the ass. But I digress. An example, actually a biological example of how your circadian rhythm works is that when the sun actually starts going down, the sun is a trigger, or it's a cue for your circadian rhythm to start producing melatonin, and thus this causes you to become sleepy. And that relates to the first example that I just showed you with my sleep and wake cycle. So when things are in balance, your body pretty much runs like clockwork. It's like an assembly line. It's like a really efficient assembly line, okay? So it's essentially just like one thing happens and another thing happens, and then these things happen in the background. You don't have to be conscious of them. These things already happen to kind of set you up for sleeping, waking, eating, and even your physical activity. Now, when your master clock, when your SCN is thrown out of balance, your natural circadian rhythms can be disrupted, and these lead to a domino of physical ailments. And if you think about an assembly line, now think about maybe 1 or 2 cogs in that assembly line not working the way it should, or maybe working slower, or maybe working faster than it should. What happens to that entire assembly line? Things get messed up, all right? So anything from changes in sleep patterns, changing in eating patterns, when you're traveling to different time zones like I did, when you work night shifts, when you go out late, when you work out late, and other disturbances to your schedule, these can actually interrupt your circadian rhythm. And one example, if you want to see what a disrupted circadian rhythm looks like, all you got to do is just observe new moms and new dads. When a kid comes into the picture, their circadian rhythms are thrown off. Like the first thing that you think about is the fact that they lack a ton of sleep. And when a new baby comes into town, parents become sleep deprived. They begin eating at random times during the day, and in general, they actually stop taking care of themselves like they used to. One of my friends, this is his first kid that just came out. He he used to work out like every single day. He was one of the most dedicated people I've ever seen inside of the gym. And then when his baby came out, it took him pretty much like a good 6 to 8 months to even just step foot inside that gym, because his whole biological process was messed up due to the fact that his SCN, or his circadic rhythm, was disrupted. Now, have you ever heard of the freshman 15? Well, for a lot of people that have kids, they have what I call the love pounds, which is an extra 15 to 20, if not more, pounds of weight gain for both parents when a child comes into their lives. Okay, when a new child comes into the picture, the rhythms get thrown out of whack. Your sleep gets disrupted, and this has a direct effect on your eating patterns, on your physical activity, and definitely on your sleep and wake cycles. So not following your circadian rhythm can actually lead to a compromised body and health. Okay, your rhythms are actually, your circadic rhythms are way more important than you think. So researchers are starting to find that not honing in or optimizing your circadian rhythm can have a number of impacts on your health and body. So there was actually a study, in a large study done with 8,000 workers from 40 different organizations. And researchers actually found that shift workers were more likely to suffer from infectious diseases, ranging from the common cold to stomach infections, than non-shift workers. These observations actually showed us that when our rhythms are off, and when we come into contact, we can actually come into contact with everyday bugs and viruses, and our immunity is shot. So, usually we are typically resistant to these, but when our rhythms are off, and maybe you've actually experienced this or not, they can actually get compromised. So bad lifestyle habits directly affect our circadian rhythms, and while they may not kill us in the strictest sense, they do make us vulnerable for factors that can kill us over time, or just make life really, really horrible. So some of the things that can happen as a result of having a disrupted circadian rhythm are fat gain, increased hunger, accelerated aging, changes in mood, neurological disorders, metabolic disorders, insomnia, hormone disruption, elevated blood pressure, and cardiovascular disease. Now, as bad as all this sounds, you have to understand that your life does not have to be perfect all the time. Okay, your life doesn't have to be perfect to be in tune with your rhythms. In fact, if you can even entrain one part of your life to a specific rhythm, you may actually find all the other things to fall in place. Now, I know this personally because when I started to fast, or when I started intermittent fasting, and when I started to follow a natural meal schedule that really was more natural to me and my lifestyle, not only did my sleep and wake cycles start to get optimized, but even my physical activity started to get optimized. Because one thing you have to realize is that your body loves being on a schedule. Your body loves routine. And I always say this when it comes to diet. When it comes to diet, your body loves to do things over and over and over. So one of the first things that I do with my clients is actually put them on a regular meal schedule. And what happens is that your body tends to get hungry during the same times once you get on a schedule long enough. Now, how long do you have to follow the schedule? It can be anywhere from like 7 to 10 days, but your body naturally attunes to the schedules that you train it on. So you have to think of your body almost like training a dog, right? So when you train a dog, you essentially try to put it on a schedule, or at least I feel like, or I put my dog on this schedule. I don't know about you, but when your dog starts to anticipate going out during a certain time, or when your dog starts to anticipate when he gets fed, he basically, his bodily processes and his own natural attunement starts to anticipate these things. All right, so how does circadian rhythms relate to fasting? Now, when you optimize your fasting schedule, you can actually optimize your circadian rhythm at the same time. And it starts from when you decide to have your first meal and when you decide to have your last meal. That is actually where I start my clients off from. So here's an example. There is such a thing called time restricted feeding, and people will say this is very similar to intermittent fasting, but I digress, because intermittent fasting can be anywhere from 12 hours to, for some people, like 1 week. With time restricted feeding, you're actually giving yourself a specific time period of when you like to eat. And this time period can range from anywhere between 8 hours to 10 hours and sometimes 12. But I find that when people have a 12-hour or even longer feeding time, it just leads to a lot more holes in their diet and a lot more habits to start coming in that they don't necessarily want to eat. It actually leads to a lot more overeating. So I actually like a shorter meal schedule. And my own meal schedule for myself that I attune to is about, I would say, 6 hours. I have my first meal at 2 p.m. and my last meal is anywhere from, I would say, 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. So actually that's about 5 hours. So my math is a little off. I failed grade 11 math, so don't don't judge me, okay? I may be Asian, but I'm not really that great at math, okay? So that's about like 5 hours of feeding time. And I find that when I attune myself to the schedule, it's a lot easier to stay within my calories, within my macros, and also it optimizes me for my sleep ahead. So how can we use fasting to attune to our circadian rhythms? The first thing is give yourself a time period of which you want to eat, of the time period of when you want to eat. Choose maybe a 6 to 8 hour time period to start, and then usually this time period will relate to when you wake up. So when you wake up, I usually like to have anywhere between 4 to 5 hours of just total fasting, of maybe drinking a coffee, or definitely drinking water, and having nothing but really non-caloric liquids enter your body. And when we do this, we allow our bodies to kind of just like keep on with our digestive system. And one thing I didn't mention is that with following fasting, it does have a process of actually healing your body as well, and we call it autophagy. And there's a lot of research behind it, and it's still kind of like up in the air how definitive this is. But I actually find that with a lot of guys who do intermittent fasting on a regular basis, they are a lot more youthful in how they look and also how they feel. So by the time of this video that I'm sharing with you, I'm 39 years old. And it may, for some people, it's like they're very surprised. They think I'm like 20 something, whatever. I don't know. And a lot of people will be like, well, you're Asian, you know, you just look young. But not necessarily, because I take care of myself. And I really actually do a good job of taking care of myself, or at least I feel I do. Still have the occasional drink every now and then, but I find that long periods of fasting lead to more youthful appearances. But don't quote me on that. It's not necessarily proven by research beyond the shadow of a doubt. So how can we attune our fast periods to our circadian rhythm? One of them is, don't eat for the next 4 to 5 hours after you wake. And then at the end of the day, you want to have your last meal at least 3 hours before you go to sleep. And yes, this means that you will not have any nighttime snacks. You will not have any nighttime red wines or anything like that, because after you eat your final meal, that's when your body still starts that process of getting ready for sleep. And one of the most important things about circadian rhythms is that we must optimize our sleep. This is what gives us energy throughout the day. This is what essentially helps us kind of live optimized lives in a way that we're not feeling held back. Okay, so the first thing is and actually the second thing is to fix your sleeping patterns. Okay, and one of the ways to do that is especially in today's day and age, when we have phones all over the place, when we're looking at screens. One of the things that I've brought into my life, that I brought into a lot of my clients' lives, is just having blue light blockers. Now, blue light blockers, they are usually orange in tint, and I'll show you one that I got off of Amazon. And it was actually a pretty cheap job, because I was just wiping it off and the thing came off. But blue light blockers, and if you look at very closely, you can actually see there is a tint on there that reflects back the blue light from getting into your eyes. When you wear blue light blockers at night, it actually starts entraining your circadian rhythm for sleep ahead. And the other way that you can fix your sleeping pattern is just by going to sleep every single night at the same time, waking up at the same time. And one of the things is also making sure that you are not going to eat at least like 3 hours prior to when you go to sleep. And the other thing is also making sure that try not, for a lot of people, but for a small percentage of people, it may be hard not to do physical activity or not to work out at the time before they go to sleep. But try to get your workouts in at least like 4 hours before you go to sleep. Do not try to work out like 2 hours or 1 hour before or right before. And the reason I say this is because when you work out, it actually boosts a lot of, again, neurotransmitters, and it can actually boost your adrenaline as well. And if you want to go to sleep, you don't necessarily want adrenaline being pumped through your body. Now, I know this firsthand because I remember when I was training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I would do a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class at 7 p.m. I would try to go to sleep at 10, and I was like wide awake. So you want to make sure that your physical activity is about 3 to 4 hours before you go to sleep. I talked about having a habitual schedule of feasting and fasting. Make sure that you stick with the same times that you eat, or try to stick with the same times as you eat as much as possible. And even though we talked about time restricted feeding, you want to actually entrain your body to be under a regular schedule of feeding and fasting. So my meals are usually 2 p.m. to 7 p.m. 2 p.m. is my first meal, 7 p.m. is my next meal. For you, it could be different. For a lot of my clients, it's actually having their first meal at 12, having their next meal at 4, having their next meal at 8. And again, when you put your body under a natural schedule, or actually under a schedule of feeding, all right, what you're going to notice is that your body actually has a natural way to the way that it likes to eat. So this is actually based on your work. This is based on your culture. This is based on just what you've kind of trained your body to do. It's actually based on culture as well. So when I put my clients under a natural schedule of eating, what happens is their bodies start to naturally attune to when they like to eat. So an example would be one of my clients, Kelly. So Kelly started off with having her meals at 12 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and 8. And then when she started following the schedule, after 7 days, she found that she was not hungry at 4 p.m. So if she's not hungry at 4 p.m., we essentially told her to skip that meal. And then what happens is that she actually found that she actually was not hungry at 12. She was actually a little bit more hungry later on in the day. So what we did is we modified her meal schedule to start eating at 1 p.m. And then when she found that she wasn't really hungry starting to eat at 1 p.m., then we pushed it back to 2 p.m. And that's kind of where we found her sweet spot. So everyone else, or everyone, even yourself, has a sweet spot to how they like to feed and fast. And the first thing is to put yourself under a regular schedule of eating, and that will start you off. And then all you gotta do is be naturally attuned to when you're hungry and follow. And what I like to say is that follow the hunger, or at least like actually follow the absence of hunger. Now, the other thing that you want to do is you want to actually do physical activity. You want to work out. We live very sedentary lives in today's day and age, and you want to make sure you're getting at least 3 days, 3 hours a week of physical activity. And my personal favorite in terms of what people should be doing for longevity, for the long term, and also to make their bodies look fucking amazing, is to work out with weights, and to specifically strength train. I don't necessarily think conditioning is needed for a lot of people. If you just focus on getting stronger in a few specific lifts, this is both for guys and girls, you're going to notice that with the increased muscle mass that you're creating, your body just moves better. It just feels better. And also, as we age, our bodies start to kind of eat away at our muscles. So it's imperative for us to do workouts that actually gain strength and gain muscle. And the next thing is, actually the last one, is to get outside and try to get as much sun exposure as possible. And one of the ways I know this is that, again, I was at my, in February, or actually it's February as of this video, or March as of this video. In February, I left for my honeymoon. And by the time I left in February, it was like incredibly, horribly cold in Toronto. And I stayed inside most of the time. And again, like, it wasn't necessarily that bad for me, but when I went to Sri Lanka, when I went to Maldives, I spent about like 80% of my time outside, and actually in the sun as well. And what I noticed is that my sleep patterns, I started to get more deep sleep as a result of spending more time outside. Okay, so sunlight can and should be the trigger that resets your circadian clock, and it's your timing cue, all right? So essentially, when the sun hits your body, that's your SCN saying, I need to be awake. And then when the sun starts going down, that's your SCN saying, I need to chill out and relax. So the sun entrains our physiology, and getting more sun and being more outside, it actually helps prevent a lot of critical illnesses. And sunlight can and should be the trigger that resets your circadian clock daily, and it's the timing. It's like essentially a timing cue, which entrains the physiology of not only humans but all animals and all plants and all living things under the sun. All right, and let me summarize this entire video. Okay, so our circadian rhythms are a 24-hour clock that influence sleep and wake cycles, hormone release, eating habits, digestion, hunger, body temperature, and other bodily functions. They respond primarily to light, darkness, eating habits, and physical activity. Not following your circadian rhythm can really lead to a lot of bad stuff in your health later on. And you can entrain. The last thing is that you can entrain your circadian rhythms to start working for you instead of against you. All right, so I would start with your feeding periods, and then I would definitely continue that on with your sleeping and waking periods. Okay, and it's on you to actually entrain your circadian rhythms, and also to start getting back in tune with your natural rhythms. And intermittent fasting just works perfectly with this, and it's almost like part and parcel. It's like Thelma and Louise. It's like Abbott and Costello. Whatever partnership you can think of that's like super awesome. These two things actually work together, and they are essentially, they work with each other, and they entrain both intermittent fasting and circadian rhythms. They actually entrain each other. So yeah, I hope you got a lot out of this video. If you liked it, then please click on that thumbs up. And also, if you want more videos like this, then please subscribe. Press that subscribe button down there, and that notifications button somewhere up there. And yes, I will be coming out with more videos in relation to not only circadian rhythms, but also optimizing your body and health to be the best you possible. And I really do feel that when you transform your body, you definitely transform your life, because your body and your choices around your body are essentially the only choices that we have control over. So again, if you like this video, please like it. If you really want more of these, then please subscribe, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.